Okay, welcome to our new meeting in which we're going to talk about findings and how to present findings. As usual, let's begin with a quote. Today's quote emphasizes the fact that some results may be considered wrong and you get disappointed. But those same results may emerge later as an available contribution of your study. So you have to be careful and not to put aside outcomes of your research because you think that they are not good enough because you didn't expect them. Usually, what you do not expect results a great asset of your study. So remember what Lisa Randall says. And this is the agenda for today. Okay? We are going to talk about that important chapter of presenting findings. But as usual, the first point of the agenda is to talk about the exercise that was given to you the previous week. This is an example of your submitted work, which presents a coherent set of pivotal elements. You can see that the paradigm, the research paradigm, the research design, the way that the sample was selected, and the data analysis chosen, all of them are coherent. So this is a good example of that. And this reflection is certainly thoughtful, okay? I have to challenge just one small part of it, the one in red, because that verb, states that the research design was selected because the researcher had quantitative and qualitative data. That implies that data was gathered before selecting the research design and not the other way around as it should be. That is probably not the case, but it is what can be inferred from the text. So the possible existence of both type of data emerge from the type of research question asked that may necessary to gather those types of data in order to answer them. It is not because you have that data that you choose the research method. You choose the research method because the research question ask for that kind of information. Okay, so the focus of today's webinar is the findings chapter on how to develop it. Let's begin by stating the main goal of the chapter. As the slide states, the objective is to present the results of the study clearly and emphasize their significance. In other words, it is to create the showroom of our work. It is exactly the same that when you are trying to sell a product. Sorry. So, to achieve such a goal, you need to follow some principles that are based on organization, remembering the reader, clarity, and prioritizing the display of the results. Of all these principles, sorry, too much talking today. Okay. Of all these principles, the second one may make you wonder the reason to do it. Think as a spectator rather than as the presenter. But it is simple. You want to display your findings, which is at the end the same as selling them. Therefore, they must be understandable for the readers who are in fact the buyers of them. So when you write this chapter, you think how readers will want to see your material presented. What could be easier for them to grasp your ideas. Okay, so this chapter is the display, the showroom of your dissertation, in which you show off the outcomes of your work. Okay, you work very hard, you got some results, and now it's time to show off, to say, hey, people, look, this is what I have found. And you need to present all those findings in a way that everyone can be impressed by them. As I said before, your university may have a specific way to present the results of your work, including headings and subheadings. However, the next slide will present the most common information that is that should be in this chapter. But that does not mean that they are headings or subheadings. No, no, no. It doesn't mean that you have to present the next slide's information and headings or subheading. What it means is that the information is usually included in that chapter in one way or another. And here you have the type of information that is evident in the finding chapters. Here you have it. So in one way or another, in that chapter, we can find all these elements, okay? We will have a description of the participant, even though that has been said in the methodology chapter. But perhaps you are going to present some tables that talks about the participants. So the information is there in a way, in a different way. It's not in a text, but it's in a table, for instance, okay? So all these things are important to be part of this chapter. And look at the discrepant cases and not conforming data. That's important. As I said in the previous webinar, when you include data that challenge the rest of your data, that is different and that it does not follow the ideas that you expected, when you present them and then in the next chapter you discuss them and try to get an explanation for that, you really improve the quality of your work. Okay, and from this point on, we will focus on how to present the results of your work. To do that, three main tools are used: tables, figures, and text. The examples that I will present are from the dissertation of my mentee, Dr. Christian Gelderks, that was awarded as the best dissertation of 2012 at Jones International University. I'm very proud of his work, and I usually show off that work like you do with your chat. Okay, let's begin talking about the use of tables to present findings. Adrian says, how do we decide whether to call chapter 4 the results of the findings chapter? No, you just have to look for what is the rule that your university follows or your supervisor follows. That's all. Don't complicate your life more. Okay, so tables are intended to present information concisely, as you can see in the image. Very direct, very straightforward, including the source of the information if the information is not has not emerged from your work. And this is an example of a table to present quantitative findings. Look at the simplicity of the presentation. Direct information without excessive use of lines and titles. Sorry. Okay, so it's straightforward. This is the information, and you don't put too many things to distract. The same is also true for a table that shows qualitative results. Very, very simple, very illustrative, and nice. As you see, Dr. Gelder says things that emerge from his study, strategies and characteristics. Very short sentences or phrases. In fact, they are not sentences, they are basically phrases, and they are short and illustrative. Okay. And these are the main principles to follow when using tables to present findings. They emphasize that information should be presented concisely. And pay attention to the second principle that rules out the repetition of information. And that's an special characteristic in this chapter. What you include in this chapter has to provide information, not repeat information, but give new information. Okay? And the second one, as you see, it is intended that each table can be understood in isolation after you introduce the table or follow the table with a short text to guide the interpretation. That's all. And the last one is usually used both in APA referencing style and in Harvard too. So you identify each table with numbers. The first number corresponds to the chapter, and the second number corresponds to the order of presentation. Okay, the second tool is figures, which include graphs, histograms, maps, photos, etc. The main goal is to illustrate findings in a clear and direct way. So you don't have, if you imagine that you have to describe the whole information in that figure in a text, how long that text will be, how difficult to talk about each one of those points there. And it's so easy to present a figure that illustrates the whole situation. Okay, this is an example of a figure that illustrates a quantitative finding. Okay. It's an histogram, and you can see you can derive a lot of information from it. And this is one to show a qualitative result. Again, it's a figure that presents information and even sequence of the steps that are represented in that figure. If you have to say the same with a text, you will have a long text that may be not as illustrative as this figure. So these are the principles that guide the use of figures in the Find It chapter. Like with tables, they point out that figures should be used only if they contribute significantly to the understanding of the result, not because they look pretty. Some people say, oh, I need something beautiful to put into this chapter. This chapter is too dry. Let me put a figure. No, you use the figure if that figure contributes significantly to the understanding of the point. As I said before, if you have to say the same using a long text, you better use a figure, okay? And the last one is important. Do not duplicate the associated text, but add essential figures. It is not that you write a text and then say the same in the figure. No, it's not that. The figure has to contribute, okay? And they are titled in the same way that the table. And the final tool is text. You know that texts are the substance of a dissertation. But in the Find This chapter, they should be used in a cautious way, focusing on guiding the reader's attention to the main features of what you have found. This is a chapter in which texts are usually short, direct, and they are not, if you can say the same with a table or with an image, you don't need the text. So the text is used to guide the reader as what the table or what the figure presents. This is an example of how to present a quantitative finding using a text and without discussing it. If you read that text, you see that the results are presented, but they are not discussed. As I have said before, you discuss in this chapter only if it is a requirement of your university or of your supervisor. Otherwise, you just present. This example just tells what happened. This text does the same for a qualitative result. As you can see, the text guides the reader to interpret a figure without repeating the specific information showed in the figure. Okay, so it says, oh, there you look at this figure and check that in this actual you have this, and in the other axis you have that one, and there is a relationship. That's all that you say. These are the main principles that rule the use of text in the Find This chapter. Pay special attention to the last principle, since it clarifies the role of text for qualitative results. In qualitative results, texts have a different role than in quantitative ones. So they may be longer, but you have to be aware that the presentation has to be well organized and usually around the category or the themes that have emerged, okay? So, but despite that, texts are illustrative, are descriptive in this chapter. And we get to the common mistakes. the most common mistakes supervisors and editors find in the results chapter. But if you want to avoid these mistakes, please apply the following principles. To avoid the first one, select only the information that is most relevant to the question you want to answer in your manuscript. Include information that may or may not support your hypothesis, since you should let your readers know that you have carefully considered all the data relevant to your research question. For the second one, some data might be better understood in a more visual format, like a table or a figure. In theory, if you are able to capture the essence of most of your data by using clear graph and illustration, the text portion of the results might be one of the shortest sections of your dissertation. To avoid the third one, your text should complement the graphical information and vice versa. If you are not able to describe information like controls, statistical analysis, actual p-values, and key observation in your figure legends, then include it in the text in a text form. But if you can do that, if you can really present all the information in a graphical way, that's better. To avoid the next one, organize your information. It is usually done in the order of the research question, hypothesis, or objective, and from most to least important. That's a very good way of organizing the presentation of your results. Why? Because you formulated some questions and you are expected to answer those questions. So if you present your findings in the same order of your question, and you begin with the most important findings and then with the least important for each one of those research questions, you are going to provide a smooth path for the reader to understand your point. Adrian, so present the facts that the data indicate, not interpretations, implications, or arguments through a theoretical lens. No, unless you are required to do that, okay? And I'm going to tell that when I talk about the last one. The next mistake could be avoided if you keep your descriptions concise. Eliminate phrases that establish, for instance, passive voice structures. Because when you use active voice and choose strong verbs, your sentences will shrink, will be shorter, and your message will be clearer. It is unusual principle to avoid the use of passive voice in dissertations. But I mean, it's not a fixed one. You can use it, but try to not do it too much. The next one is you can avoid that use of numbers that are meaningless, presenting long strings of very detailed numbers without highlighting relevant trends may cause confusion. So you better help readers digest your information. If you need to present very long and detailed number, you can use an appendix to do that. And the last one, to answer Adrian's question, unless your university requires it, present results without discussing them. Because remember that you still have to write a discussion chapter. So if you discuss findings in the findings chapter, what are you going to do in the discussion chapter? Unless your university requires that. Do you mean we can use passive voice? No, you try to, you should avoid the use of passive voice as much as possible. Why? To make your sentences shorter, okay? And in that way, the whole section will be more comprehensible. So the key to find this chapter is still 3S: simple, short, and straightforward. Absolutely. And that's a principle of academic writing that applies to this chapter. And this is the main idea for today's discussion. You want to tell people, look, I have found this, and I think that these findings are significant for my field of study. Therefore, you have to present those findings in a clear, simple, as Annalyn says, simple, short, straightforward way that makes that understandable, and to a certain extent, your readers will buy your ideas. Think of that. Think of a display of a showroom in a shop, in a store. Okay, if you see a showroom that is crowded with a lot of things, that things are presented but without any organization, without spaces among the items that are presented, it is difficult for you to appreciate the beauty or the youthfulness of each item, because you are shocked by all that information together. What is the same in this chapter? Think of it as that, as your showroom, as the display of your work. If you present it, or if you present all your findings in an organized way with too many details that are not necessary, or using text when you can use table or a figure, or the other way around, that will make a wrong impression in your readers, and your readers were going to say, okay, what was the answer to each research question? Because I cannot find it here. Okay, so time to questions and answers. Okay, Erica, spend a nice time down under. Thank you very much for being part of our two groups. And I hope you can give us a written feedback about both courses when you have time, okay? Any question? Here is my description for my chapter 4, results. The chapter first reports on the demographic profile of the sample and result from the background, memory, and reminiscence section of the experimental participant booklet. It then reports the results in detail. Okay, Annalie, look at today's, of course, this is the reference of today. Look at the exercise that I want you to do. Plan your findings chapter. You may use any organizing tool you feel comfortable with, because you are going to focus on the organization of the presentation, not the actual results. Okay, so if you do that exercise, you may have a good feedback about what you have already written there. And then at the end, you have to write a paragraph reflecting about what challenges planning this chapter have given to you. Yes, okay. Remember that I always said that you have to do things as your university and supervisor require. But before writing that paragraph, you can do this. You plan all your chapter, and you analyze why. Why should I put this? For instance, for presenting the result for the first question, for the first research question, how I'm going to present that? Will I use tables? Will I use figures? What kind of tables are to present on what specific information I'm going to include in table, what I'm going to include in figures, what kind of text I will use before writing, okay? Okay, so more detail on the similarities and difference between tables and figures. All right, as you can see, both of them present specific information, right? But look at a table. This is a figure in which you can see the most relevant information and even the details with an image. A table like this one is more relied on or relies more on text, but short text. Okay. However, Adrian, there are some tables that are only with numbers. If you are using quantitative research design, some of your tables will include only statistical elements, numbers. So the idea is that they are similar because they present information concisely, and they are different because an image, a figure has an image, and you know that old proverb that says that an image equals 1,000 words. Okay. Yeah, text and number for table. Analyst say, my statistical mentor says that in quantitative result, one does not need fancy test because basic descriptive statistic and graph provide a lot of information. Oh, your tutor or your mentor is right, I would say, till a certain extent. That depends on your research question. Descriptive statistic provides a lot of information about main characteristics, even to information about some basic relationships. But imagine that you have to answer your research question by means of finding the relationship between 3 different variables that are also influenced by 2 more variables. So that implies that you need more complex statistical tests, like, for instance, linear or multiple regression. So that cannot be fully explained using just descriptive statistic. For some research question, yes. For other research question, no. Vivian, thank you. It was my pleasure to give you this presentation. Can we use table, figures, and tests to display our findings, or we have to use one of them? No. You can use all 3 elements. The key or the criterion to follow is that each one of them have to provide useful information, add information, not repeat information. Okay, so some of your results can be presented in tables, others in figures, others in text. Text can be used to introduce um, tables and figures so reader knows how to approach the interpretation. But you can use all of them, but not to present the same finding in three different ways, unless each one of those ways gives something extra, add something to that. Annalie, yes, that requires different tests. Um, there are, especially when you are looking for relationship. If you have research questions that are presented for describe, for explore, and sometime for compare, you can use descriptive statistic only. But sometimes to compare, to explore, and especially to explain, you may need more complex tests in order to address all the relationships present. Okay. By the way, the theme for December at Doctoral Net will be peace on earth, work, community, and within. So we are very merry. We'll be very merry and reflective about peace. And those are the webinars that are coming next week. We are talking about review literature in the master academic writing in a more concise way that we did it in this group. And in this group, we are going to talk about how to discuss your finding. And finally, the next week or the week after the next one, we are going to meet just in a relaxed way. Well, we are usually relaxed, in fact, but we are going to talk about our work, how you evaluated, what do you think is helpful, what do you would like to be improved, and so on. Okay, more questions? More? I'm going to finish the recording. Okay, so we can be